welcome to tonight. We're excited to hear what Joy has been preparing, and more importantly, what the Spirit's going to want to say to us. And we're all going to have a chance to dialogue, because it's been a while since we've done a teaching dialogue, hasn't it, all together? I'm actually really looking forward to this, and so hopefully we'll have a chance just to hear from the Spirit tonight, and I think it's going to really shape our church. Next week, though, is part 2 of this teaching dialogue. It's going to be online.
And then I just wanted to remind us of the following week. So next week, teach and dialogue, and then the following week is Saturday of the month. So we want to do our shared meals, but I want to encourage us to really have a think. Who is someone that hoping that you're sharing Jesus with by the way you live? The thing is, we got to plan ahead. I'm telling myself this. It's time now to invite them for those 2 Saturdays from now. No gathering, just invite someone over and have fun. All right, so let's pray, and then Joy is going to come. Joy, thank you for all the study. I know you have put into this and prepared. And yeah, let's just open our hearts to the Holy Spirit, who is a teacher. He is our teacher, and he's gifted Joy with the gift of teaching, and we're excited to listen to him tonight. So,
hi there, I'm just interjecting here because we lost audio at the beginning of Joy Stevens' teach. Today's teach is on gospel planting, and the reference is Acts chapter 17. She is referencing the philosophy of Epicurus about what a good life is, and that's something that Paul would have confronted. So here comes Joy Stevens.
The gospel, to them, it might have sounded kind of dangerous. Don't tell us that we've done wrong. Don't tell us that we need Jesus to rescue us from death. We deny death. And this is dangerous teaching because you're disturbing us. You're disturbing our peace. Okay? They might have been quite hostile in response from their cultural position. Then there was the Stoic philosophers. Okay? The Stoics believed that everything was God and God was in everything. Okay, so in the trees, God was in the trees, in the wind, in the rock, in the stone. God was in all things. If you're wondering, do we believe that? No, we don't. God created all those things. He does not dwell in all of those things, although he is not limited, so he is everywhere. Okay, the Stoics put a lot of emphasis on being very good and having the highest morals. And they had a really high sense of duty and dignity. They believed that this is how far they took it. If you couldn't keep the high morals, if you kept messing up and doing wrong things, it was better for you to commit suicide than to live a life that was not dignified and morally astute. Okay? That's how far they took this duty and dignity. That it was better for you to kill yourself if you kept messing up. So I'm like, they could receive Paul's message of the good news. That'd be a great group. But also, Paul's message might have sounded completely irrelevant to them. We know what is right and wrong, and we draw upon our dignified selves to live out our moral duty. So we don't, that doesn't have anything to do with us, because we have within ourselves the power to live this dignified and moral life. And so they might have found what Paul was saying completely irrelevant. So we're going to keep going into what he actually said to them. And now I need you to do a little bit more thinking with me, because after we finish reading this next section, I want you to pay attention to this. Paul studied his culture in order to share the gospel effectively. Paul studied his culture in order to share the gospel effectively. And I just want you guys to tell me after this what stuck out to you about how Paul went about this. We're going to look at what he did. We're going to look at his methods, and that's what we're going to share in our first discussion. Is just, look at how he did this. Look at how he did that. Okay? So here we go. Then Paul stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out to him and find them, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said. We are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, for he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, "We want to hear you again on this subject." At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. Okay? So, Christy, if you wanted to, well, Christy's got a microphone so we can hear each other. So, my question is, what do you notice? What was Paul's method? What was he doing to help in this hostile situation for them to understand the gospel? Where do we see him understanding the culture in order to share the gospel?
He says he walked among them and observed closely.
Great. So what do you think that might be important to us?
That it's not just coming in and telling them what he thinks, but he's observing, he's taking in what they are about.
Yeah. Good. What else?
You can keep your mask on.
Oh, thank you. He started where they were at.
Okay. So, started where they were at. I really like how he didn't say, "You got your religion wrong." He just affirmed, "I see you're religious." Okay? That was building a bridge instead of shooting down the bridge right at the beginning. Good. What else?
I don't know if you read, but he at least knew some of their poetry and some of their writings.
Great. Good. So he studied their culture. He used their culture to show them that your culture reveals and points to God, the living, true God, right? Good. What else?
I think he's really trying to figure out what are the most important values they have.
Yeah. Good. Trying to figure out the most important. So he's observing, he's listening, he's trying to build a bridge into their culture. What is it that they value that I can start at that point from? Yeah.
I think actually he also sees their needs. So in their philosophizing, he actually starts to see what their need is, and then he actually speaks into those needs.
Yeah, definitely. Good.
Get my workout.
2 steps. It's interesting when you see he put all the pressure on God and not them. Like he didn't say you have this wrong or you have. He didn't even talk about them. He just talked about God. He does this. He did this. Da da da.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't really talk about Jesus until like way down to verse 31, and he doesn't go into all kinds of details about him. He just says, by the man that God has appointed. So he kind of just drops that in, almost like, I'm not going to tell you all the background, and you might want to hear more about that, but he just, they wouldn't have known much about the Messiah, so he didn't really start with that, and he didn't try to explain everything right away.
Right.
We would have criticized him and been like, why didn't he say Jesus? Right?
Good.
I think there was a patience too, because I'm just looking at this. He didn't have an altar call or anything. Like, he didn't say, but there were still people that began to follow him. So he understood there was in some sense, there was a real patience of, this is going to be a journey that I'm going to be here for a while. I'll be here next week, and I'm going to be here throughout the week for those that want to chat more. And because it was a culture that, it sounds like some people didn't work. They just liked to talk and discuss. So that's kind of nice. I mean, he recognized that and had opportunity to do that with them.
Yeah. Paced. He knew he could pace himself.
Also, he didn't kind of overstay his welcome. He said what he needed to say, and he let people make their own decisions. And then he went, and the people that were interested in what he had to say then followed him to find out more.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
Good job, everybody.
Good. I think the only other thing I had written down here was that whole thing about he like Uta said, he observed and he saw that they had a shrine to an unknown god. Okay, and so they had a god that covered anything that might be neglected, right? And he used that. He saw that there was a hole here. There was a hole in your belief system, and then he didn't put him down. He didn't any of those things. He could just identify the hole in their worldview, and use that hole to show the very beginnings of the Christian worldview. Okay, great, good. Paul studied his culture for gospel effectiveness. Christy and Jeff and the elders are encouraging us to be gospel planters. And if we are going to be gospel planters, we may first need to spend some time studying our culture for gospel effectiveness. Now, I don't want you to use that as an excuse. I haven't had time to study. I can't answer everyone's questions, so I can't share anything about my faith yet. That's not what I'm saying. But I believe if we're going to be gospel planters, we have to study our culture, and we have to be equipping ourselves to answer objections and give a good, wise, and thoughtful answer in a hostile world. We also have to be able to see where there's holes in the alternative worldviews. We need to be able to see where our culture actually reveals God, and we can use that for our conversations. Okay? So, we're going to switch gears now, and I want us to look at ourselves. And I want us to say, okay, that was the Athenians' cultural moment. What is our cultural moment? I had the chance to take an online apologetics course a couple months ago. What I want to tell you is the things I'm going to share with you for the next 5 minutes didn't come from me. I think they came from a lady named Rachel on this course, but I didn't write down her full name in the notes that I took. But I definitely don't want to steal any credit. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because when I heard her give this talk, it made all the lights go on. And everything in me that I feel in our hostile environment, she gave me words for, okay? So I'm going to share with you 3 cultural realities that make us feel like we are on the back foot. 3 cultural realities that make us feel like we're on the back foot. So in the academic world, in the early 2000s, there were significant, high-profile atheistic writers who made some really big claims about what we could understand about the nature of reality and what it means to be human based on some scientific theories. Okay, so these writers put out books like The God Delusion, okay? Other books like that. And that was a huge turning point in the early 2000s. As atheistic writers actually kind of started to go on the offensive against religion, okay? In our cultural moment, some people believe that faith and science are completely opposed, that you cannot be a person of faith and be a rational, thinking, astute member of society. In our cultural moment, there are people who believe that science has disproven God. There are people who think, I can't even think or entertain the idea. I won't even entertain the idea of faith because I would have to stop being a thinking, rational, scientific person. So some of your friends and your family that you want to share faith with, people at work possibly, they are unwilling to consider the claims of Jesus because they think that faith is intellectually embarrassing. They may believe that having faith is intellectually embarrassing. Secondly, maybe you've had these conversations. Maybe these are more your friends and family. In our cultural moment, people believe, why should I bother with God? I don't need God to be happy. I have a fulfilling job. I have some good hobbies. I'm a good member of society. I'm happy. I don't need God to be happy. I have a fulfilling life. So some people that you're trying to share faith with believe that faith is emotionally irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant to me. I am happy without God. Why should I bother with God? And the third cultural reality. Sometimes our popular culture, our media, maybe your science teacher, maybe your RE teacher, they tell us things like Christians are against diversity. Christianity is a form of white man's power in the West to hold power over other people groups. Maybe our understanding of the purpose and the place of sex, our understanding of the purpose of marriage, our understanding that Jesus is the only way to God, our belief that there are absolute truths that are always true and right, all those things, instead of just being tolerated, now they're targeted. And some of the people that you may be trying to share faith with believe that your Christian faith is actually morally harmful. And that one, guys, that one's hard for me. I think of Luke 6. Jesus talking to his disciples, and he looks right at them, and he tells them, "Blessed are you who are poor. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you are filled." And then in verse 22, "Blessed are you when men hate you, when they exclude you and insult you." I have pretty thick skin. I don't really care if I'm included all that much. I can handle being excluded and maybe not liked. But then he says this, "Blessed when they reject your name as evil because of me." Blessed are you when they reject your name as evil because of me. And that's what some of you may be feeling or experiencing right now. That I'm on the side of the living God, and people think that I am morally harmful. And that's really tough. I want to encourage you that we do not need to be on the back foot. Now, I have not raised a Christian response to any of those three things in this moment. I'm just letting the weight of this fall on us, okay? But there are good, thoughtful, logical answers to all of these objections. I just want you to feel that. If you're feeling in your heart a little unsettled, if this type of thing makes you feel doubt rising in you. We're not going to be able to talk about all those answers right now, but there are good answers. So, this is the second piece of discussion, and this is more your experience. Tell me, what do you think about this analysis that Rachel offered us about our culture and helped put words to some of the things I think and feel? So, yeah, is there one of these that stuck out to you? Is there a story you want to share with us about how you've experienced this? What's your response? And I'm not saying that these are the only objections to our faith, but I felt like this was a really good summary. Yeah, what's your response to that? Katie, right here.
Yeah, I think firstly, to make sure that it doesn't, as you said, make you doubt that your faith is strong enough to be criticised, condemned, and all those kind of things for it. And secondly, for it not to just make you want to be silent and not ever talk about your faith, because you have, you need to be able to talk about your faith as well, even if people don't agree, and that's standing up for God, isn't it? Like He would stand up for you. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I identify with the first one. I think could expand a little bit to faith is for those who are weak. It's embarrassing to need faith because I can't make it on my own. So I think that fits in with that number one that I've experienced in other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the one that I see most often in my friends and people around me is that it's emotionally irrelevant, that why would I try if I don't need to, or I have tried and it hasn't helped me in any way. But I think the one I'm more concerned about, like recently, is that it's morally harmful because the culture is more disagreeing, like it's more prevalent that people are disagreeing with the morals that we uphold. And as I grow up and as I listen to people around me, I am more concerned that that's something that's coming up, that my faith is morally unjust.
Yeah.
I think for me, the reaction of a person is actually good because you can respond to that, you can interact with that person. I think people who find faith emotionally irrelevant is actually the hardest to reach. They're so apathetic, they're just happy with whatever it is. They, whatever their situation, they're fine with it. I think that is far more difficult.
Yep, I can understand that.
Yeah, following on from that, I think when people are apathetic, there's just no comeback. Actually, I find more when people are willing to discuss, argue their point, then there's something to talk about. But when people literally go, if that's what makes you happy, and walk off, there's nothing really to actually come back to.
Yeah.
So I have a question, and maybe it's not something you can answer this week, but faith is morally harmful. I'm just thinking, like, it makes sense to me. I'm wondering, is it something? Is a lot of times the people that would maybe fall into that camp, is it because of the history of the church that we're dealing with, or a specific sect of Christianity that they're very familiar with, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, we got a lot of baggage that we have to unpack with people.
Yeah. And then what makes it difficult is people get to interpret historical events through whatever lens they want to raise as the lens to look through as well. So it doesn't feel like it's a level playing ground to analyze what the church has done in history. Yeah.
just to encourage at this point, I was one of those people. I thought I didn't need it. I was great, thank you very much. And when God put this, what I considered at the time, very weak young man in my household, and, you know, I can remember even now standing at my ironing board thinking, you're such a fool, you know, at him. And yet, I mean, I need to think about that, how it actually happened, really, because I'm absolutely, you know, I was really happy with my life. And I certainly didn't need Jesus, I thought.
Yeah.
So just to encourage you guys, you know, I've been a Christian 30-odd years now, so...
Yep.
Yeah.
God is working. Yep.
I'm just wondering if the second one, with the year we just had, I feel like more people may feel the need.
Yeah.
Because they probably have been as isolated and alone as they've never been before. Now, equally, we're coming out of it, and so we're all probably feeling anything quicker than we ever have before. So, yeah, I don't know, I'm just wondering if there's a bit of a shift with the second one.
Yeah, and I hear people wrestling with, like, they're aware now that this year has affected them, and I just wonder if studying our culture and being able to meet people in that place is going to be important.
I think what can add to the difficulty with number 3, faith is morally harmful, is when you have Christian people that have decided to go against what the Bible is saying and are also saying that Christianity and that's when they go into you're too literal with the Bible, you're too fundamental, and this is okay. And I have friends that have stepped into that I've known for years, and it's quite interesting, some of their almost dislike towards any Christian that would say the way they've chosen to live would be wrong is now coming out on Facebook, and decisions they've made. And I think for young people, that's something that's going to be harder and harder to actually stand against, is, are you going to do what God says, or are you going to slip into doing what the world is saying? And how do you handle that?
And it may have always been a cancel culture, but we didn't cancel each other online, publicly. Do you know what I mean? And so we feel that even more now.
Yeah.
You're not just waiting on a
We'll
newspaper
do Steve,
article.
and then we'll keep going.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of what Susan just said and Jeff as well. I think something to go where you want with your talk and stuff, but I'm almost jealous of Paul because they didn't have a predisposed opinion about God. He could say, let me introduce you to him, whereas we come across people and you say I'm a Christian and I feel on the back foot because they apply to me things that may not be true. And so someone's gotten to them before me, so that helps contribute to that feeling of being on the back foot, because like, oh gosh, now I gotta undo. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I just keep thinking about the scripture that says they will know we are Christians by our love. And so in response to that, is there an opportunity to show them, something different, and that is love that is not like they maybe have experienced before. But that just keeps going through my mind to share.
Yep. Good. Really good thoughts, everyone. And hanging with the reality of our cultural moment. And it'd be, I kind of said to God, oh, this isn't real uplifting, God. Are you sure this is what I'm supposed to say? But we have to put it on the table, okay? So I've got 10 minutes, and we'll finish up a little bit more positively, okay? I've got 2 weeks to talk about defense of the faith, or apologetics. And I thought for a long time, what do I do in 2 weeks about this topic, okay? And so you guys know we cannot give answers to all of the objections that you face here and now. But let me just briefly go back through these, really briefly, okay? and send us out on a more positive note. So first of all, faith is intellectually embarrassing. Are faith and science mutually exclusive? Do you have to stop being a thinking and serious person to be a Christian? Has science disproven God? Science has not disproven God. Not even close. I believe that science and some of the most recent discoveries they've even made reveals more about God. I also believe that there's a lot of pressure on us from people. I didn't write this down, so I got to make sure I say it clearly. Some people have decided that science is the only way to know truth, that the only way we can come up with a true thing that we can know about the world is if we can test it with a scientific theory, or with a scientific method, okay? And there's a big push out there, I think especially in schools, that the only truth that exists is scientific truth. And that is just not true. There is truth out there that is outside of science, and science is limited in what it can tell us. Science can tell us how things work, and it's wonderful that we have these minds to figure out how things work, but it cannot tell us why things work. It is not the only way to find truth. And even our own justice system does not rely on the scientific method. It relies on witnesses. It relies on historical evidence. There are other ways to determine truth than just the scientific method. So, next week, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that one. We're going to go one little bit low levels, next step in answering that one. Is faith emotionally irrelevant? And I hear you, and I agree. I like what Helen said. With the other things, at least you can have an exchange of ideas. But to be able to talk to our friends and family who believe that they are happy without God, we need to be able to answer the question, why bother with God if I'm happy? We need to be able to help people honestly reflect on, well, what makes a good life? What makes a good life? And is happiness enough? Being happy, according to what God tells us, is not enough. What it means to be human, a good and fulfilling human life, needs more than just pleasure and happiness for myself. A good life also needs purpose and truth. And so I don't know yet how to have these conversations with people, but I want to start thinking in this direction. If you'll allow me to present these ideas and tell you I don't have finished answers here for you. A good life needs purpose. And I have a friend right now that I'm dialoguing about faith with, and I'm sure she would say, I have lots of purpose in my life. Well, what we believe is that a good life also needs not just temporary purpose that's going to end when I die, but ultimate purpose. Gives us a good and fulfilling life. And part of our ultimate purpose is to be worshipers. Part of our deepest need and longing is for fascination and awe. It's common to every single human. It's a solidifying thing between all of us as humans. We need to be in awe of something. And whether it's Oxford United or the living God, we're going to throw our affection on something, right? So part of at the most basic level, having ultimate purpose means being a worshiper, okay? Truth is essential as well to having a to the human experience. Okay? Every human does need truth. We were created for ultimate purpose and not just temporary purpose. And I know that I've just given you a tiny little answer there on a huge, big topic. But that's where the direction I would start to go on this one. And I want to make sure we're not down in the dumps. There is good answers. Is faith morally harmful? I hope that we are all humble enough, and I do think we are, to admit that at times the church has been an instrument of injustice in the world. But I would also argue that the world would be a very different place had not Christians worked for the protection of the innocent, relief of poverty, justice for the oppressed, health care for the most vulnerable for many, many centuries. And far from being morally harmful, I believe that Jesus and the gospel is beautiful. His message is morally good, both for the individual and for our society. Being made in the image of God brings all people dignity and purpose that is good for our society. And that is what we believe, that all people are valued and have dignity, and that's good for society. Guys, we're not going to get to go into it, but atheism does not provide dignity and purpose for everyone in society. As a worldview, atheism is very denigrating to us as people, to the individual, our value. Jesus' ethic of not just loving those who love us back, not just lending to those who return our donations, but of actually caring for, speaking to, forgiving, and lending to our enemies. Jesus' ethic, it's beautiful. It is good for the individual and society. I could go on and on about how Jesus elevated women beyond what the culture of his time said was possible. I could go on and on about how Jesus included the marginalized, those who were vulnerable and on the very edges of society. But ultimately, I believe that the gospel of Jesus is beautiful because Jesus offers us himself. And the fullness and the presence, oh, Joy, so emotional. The fullness and the presence of the living God lives in us. And he can meet every single need we have. Every single need the lonely has. Every single need the young person with a body disorder, a body-related dysphoria. That's the word I'm looking for. He meets the needs of every person who is elderly. He meets the needs of every person who is addicted. The living God living in us is good for the individual and society because he meets all of our needs and transforms us to be filled with his love and his compassion. The gospel of Jesus Christ is beautiful. So, what we've talked about might make you feel like you're on the back foot. And next week, I want to go through these three things just a little bit better. And I'm actually going to show you, we're going to look at a fair number of videos because there are people who can give us quicker answers than Joy Stevens can and better answers than Joy Stevens can. So I'm gonna put together kind of a montage a little bit of answering these things quickly. But my whole point with this 2-week little series is that I want you to feel equipped, that you know where you can go to find answers to whichever one of these things you want to pursue and be equipped in. So that's really what I'm going to do next week, is give a little bit of answers and show you a lot of different places where you can find answers. Okay? And then lastly, I have a gift here for everybody. This is the church bought you these. So, here, can you get those to, yeah. You can have one for every household. The Stevens are reading this together after dinner. We read about 3 or 4 pages a couple nights a week. We're not, yeah. I got you this book because it's a book for teenagers, and it answers some of these big questions. Is are Christians against diversity? Why can't you just be good without God? Is happiness enough? Has science disproved Christianity? I got you a kid's book, a teenager's book, because we got to be able to talk about these things in the most basic terms. And this lady does an excellent job of taking out all the academic language, all the philosophical language that isn't going to do you any good when you talk with your mate, okay? Because they don't have the academic, for the most part, language and the philosophical language. They just have the feeling, or this is kind of what I feel after I've gone through science class all these years at school. I feel like there must not be a God. This is great for us because it strips away academic language. If we need to be able to give answers to these things in the way that we would explain them to someone in year 4. And that's what this book can help us do. Okay? So the church wants to resource you to have answers to these questions. Next week, I want to resource you with where you can go, especially on the internet, to find answers to these questions. And I just want to encourage you to pursue answers to things that you need answers for, and tell the elders. If you have something that you need answers for, then tell them so that they can do a series on it and help us all move forward in that area. Okay, so the gospel is beautiful. Jesus is beautiful, and we're going to just worship him with one song here and ask him to help us to see the beauty of the good news.